There's something that I think most of us can probably relate to. Having something good happen in our life or doing something that we might be able to feel proud of. And suddenly there's this rush of sometimes pretty intense feelings of fear, anxiety, self doubt, maybe even shame that comes rushing in and causes you to want to move away from that feeling and even the experience. You find yourself preparing for something bad to happen. There's a reason that we do that. And today I want to talk even more about what do we do with that? What can we do when that happens to be able to get to a place where we can just feel the goodness? Welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you for joining me. This really is something that I think most people can relate to, even without a history of childhood trauma. And there's some different reasons for that, but it is something that becomes a huge part or is a part of self-protection. And that may not seem to make a lot of sense. And I don't want to get into a lot of the why today. If you want me to dive into that a little bit more, I have talked about it on occasion a few other times, but if you do want me to get into that a little bit more, let me know in the comments. So it comes from a place of self-protection predominantly. Part of it can also be habitual, but there's a reason that we tend to do that. And it's important. Part of healing is being able to shift how we respond in those moments. So instead of feeling that rush of doubt or shame, anxiety, we can feel the good, whatever that might be in that moment. We can feel it. And even if it feels a little scary, sit with it, be with it, and allow it to be internalized, be able to experience it on a physiological level so that not only can we feel good about that, but it begins to change how we respond generally when there are good things that happen. So if you follow Brene Brown, one of the ways that she describes this is like foreboding joy. And people describe it differently, but it is that idea of something good happens and then you immediately prepare for something bad to happen, like when is the other shoe going to drop sort of thing, right? And that the impact that has on us is really quite significant. It reinforces unworthiness, being undeserving, not enough, and it reinforces the fear that we have. It reinforces the idea that being fearful, that thinking about what that other shoe could be, preparing for that shoe to drop, it reinforces the idea that those are important things to do, that they're important and even necessary for survival. Now, obviously, on a cognitive, logical level, we may know that that is not reality, that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. But we don't live our lives from a place of conscious, cognitive reality. All of us live our lives from a place of emotion, expectation, and beliefs about who we are and what we can expect from the world. And that's why healing isn't about changing who you are, it's changing who you believe you are. So when something happens in your life, and it could be something kind of completely out of the blue, it could be something maybe that you've worked toward. But when something good happens, learning to sit with it is, I would say, probably one of the most significant parts of that aspect of the journey. Because our inclination, when that discomfort comes in, our inclination is to do all the things that we've always done to get back to what we're used to feeling, which is the doubt, the unworthiness, and that sort of thing. And again, that's It doesn't make a lot of sense, but that is to protect ourselves from feeling the hurt, the disappointment, the rejection, if we were to allow ourselves to really hold on to that feeling. So if, for example, a compliment, compliments can be really challenging for people to accept. And I was definitely somebody that had a really hard time. And I've said this before, but it would be so uncomfortable to me that I would respond in a way that was dismissive and sometimes probably even experienced as rude. Now, that certainly isn't what I was feeling. I wasn't trying to be dismissive of what they were saying because it didn't matter or they didn't matter or something like that. And I certainly wasn't trying to be rude about it. But it can come off that way sometimes to people. And I think, in a sense, rightfully so, because how we respond can certainly look some particular ways. And I wasn't like aggressive or anything like that. It was just more that dismissive sort of thing that can come across that way. So if you have difficulty accepting compliments, there's probably a way, maybe a couple different ways depending on the circumstance or who it might be, that you tend to respond. There's a way that you generally tend to respond in those circumstances. So learning to accept a compliment is a process. And to be honest, there are times, even now in my life, I think more so if it kind of catches me off guard, that my initial response is like, I'm not quite sure what to say. I don't necessarily respond in a way that potentially could be considered rude as much anymore anyway. But I do kind of have that feeling of like deer in headlights sort of thing on occasion. So practicing being in that place of discomfort, being able to sit with it for a moment and accept it. So let's say it's not somebody standing in front of you. Let's say it's in an email or a message or something like that. So you sit with that discomfort and you notice whatever the thoughts and the feelings are that come up. But then you take a second, take a deep breath and say, okay, I can sit with this discomfort. This is something that I've struggled with for a long time. It's natural that I'm feeling this way, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. And that is important, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. Because that self-protection kicks in because it automatically believes that it is a bad thing, that it's going to lead to something bad. So being able to sit from that present place, like being present in your body, and remind yourself that it's not a bad thing. And I mean, we could even take it further, particularly like with a compliment, and think, is it possible that that person could actually feel that way? Now this, like if we're talking about steps that you check off to get to a place where you can accept compliments, that's typically going to be a little bit further down the road, but it can certainly all go together depending on, how you're feeling about it. But sitting with it, being with it, recognizing that you can feel that unease, that fear, even any shame that might come up, that you can sit with that feeling, that energy can be present for you. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing, that you will be okay. Potentially, depending on where your thoughts go, generally speaking, maybe even that the person saying it to you is genuine in what they're saying, or that it's possible that they really mean it, that they truly can feel that way. And this is where the idea of, is it possible, can play a significant role, because there's a good chance you're going to be able to tell yourself, if you ask, is it possible that, or could they really mean that? You might be able to say, well, maybe, and then there's likely going to be a but. So asking yourself, is it possible that this person could actually feel that way? The answer is going to be yes. You may still have a lot of buts, but the answer, is it possible that this person could genuinely think and feel that? Absolutely yes. This was one of the things that helped me get to a place where I could accept that I was loved. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible. If there are compliments that you tend to receive, and a compliment can mean a lot of different things, right? It could be about being, really great and skilled at a particular thing. It could be something related to how you look or something like that. But those can be challenging in lots of different types of ways. But like maybe being a kind person, or being able to do something really well, being like your support being really beneficial to somebody. Is it possible that somebody could actually think those things or feel that way? Yes. So the same thing applies, like if you get the job that you wanted. You might have a lot of fears, like what if I screw it up? What if they realize they made a mistake? What if I really am not qualified? So there could be tons of what ifs, right? And lots of feeling that goes along with that. So being able to, again, notice the feeling that is coming up. You don't necessarily have to name it. If you can, that's great. But you don't necessarily have to name it. You just need to be able to be aware that there is some discomfort that is present. That's enough for this part of the practice. So recognizing, okay, I'm feeling really whatever, or even just if you generalize it as anxious or fearful. So you recognize what it is, or you recognize that something is present. If you can recognize what it is, great. And then you practice being in that space. You notice, where are you feeling this in your body? Are you feeling nauseous? Are you feeling tense? Are you getting a headache? Is your heart racing? Are you sweating? So just noticing what is present for you without judgment. That can sometimes take quite a bit of practice too, but ideally it's without judgment, because if you judge yourself, that's going to create more problems. So just noticing. And when I say notice, it's kind of thinking of it incredibly objectively, where like if you were incapable of having a feeling, but you noticed that there was something happening. So it's noticing that there's these feelings, noticing any thoughts that are coming up around it. So you're just noticing that there's the thoughts, maybe noticing specifically what those thoughts are, maybe specifically what those feelings are, but you're just noticing that there is something that is present, right? And probably that it doesn't feel very good in some aspect or another. And reminding yourself that this is how you often respond in times when you're feeling concerned or feeling afraid or uncomfortable, that this is how you have typically responded, that it doesn't mean anything other than it's a learned response based on self-protection. And I know it might seem strange to think about saying all of these things to yourself in these moments, but generally speaking, even if you're not aware of having a lot of thoughts, you're having a lot of thoughts, and those thoughts are creating feelings, and the feelings are reinforcing the thoughts, potentially creating even more and different thoughts, all reinforcing the same types of feelings and ultimately beliefs. So part of what you're doing is countering those automatic types of thoughts, the fear, the shame, whatever it is. You're countering those things. So being able to remind yourself that you're safe, that response is just an automatic response about protecting yourself from disappointment or hurt. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. And again, without judgment, because that's really, really important. So just practicing that over time. And it can be helpful to reflect back on different times in your life when maybe something good happened, or maybe somebody paid you a compliment, or whatever it might be. When I say something good happened, getting the job that you want can be a pretty significant thing, but it doesn't have to be something really significant. It could be that you had plans to do something outside and the weather turned out well. So it really doesn't have to be something big at all. And maybe that stood out to you because you were afraid that something bad was going to end up happening, or something along that line. So it may stand out to you in some way. But if you can reflect back on times when something reasonably good happened and you had doubt about it, or you were waiting for that other shoe to drop, if you can reflect back on that and recognize that, okay, actually, there was no other shoe. That was kind of it. That was it, and nothing bad really happened. Now, if you're really practiced at that self-protective part, you might be able to go to look at that experience and then think to a year later than when that experience happened. You might say, well, yeah, the other shoe did drop because a year later this happened. Now, when we do that, it seems to make sense. But if you think about it kind of objectively, I think you're probably going to be able to recognize that this seemingly good thing that happened, maybe a small thing, maybe a relatively big thing, that happened at some point in your life, and then maybe something a year later happened that wasn't so good, maybe even pretty bad. Our mind, because of the self-protective piece, is going to connect those things. And you probably have some examples that you could probably reflect on. Maybe you don't remember them very well, but a lot of us have done that on occasion. But if you look at it a little bit objectively, you're probably going to be able to recognize that this thing that happened a year later really was not at all connected to this good thing that happened earlier in your life. So if you can look back on something and think, did it turn out okay? Maybe you got the job. Maybe you made some friends at work, and I don't mean like best friends necessarily, though that can happen, but just, you enjoyed being with your coworkers. Maybe you ended up getting a promotion. Maybe it led you to meeting somebody that got you to your next best job. So being able to really take in and recognize the experiences for what they are, not what we think that they might mean, not what we fear it could mean or it could lead to. And this really is a practice. It's something that we have to be mindful of because it's not natural. It's something that we have to put energy into because oftentimes sitting with those feelings is not easy. And then being able to be intentional about taking the time and creating space to look at, did something bad end up happening? Whatever that might look like. like you have to be intentional about going back and looking at these things, being able to feel whatever feelings are present. That's not an easy thing to do because part of how we cope is not doing those things, right? So in order to get ourselves to be able to do it, it takes real energy. It takes emotional energy, and it can even take physical energy. Because we really have to work at allowing the space for ourselves to do that. And you hear me talk about gratitude all the time. And it's hard to feel grateful, for example, for getting that job or receiving that compliment. It can be hard to actually feel any sense of gratitude for those types of things when you're caught up in that fear or shame around it, right? And so as you practice and you're really intentional, gratitude will play a role in that as well. It will help you connect to gratitude, and practicing gratitude generally can also help you get to that place where you're able to talk yourself through those things, being able to really be with that sense of possibility that it could be real, and ultimately even that maybe you do deserve it. Maybe you are worthy of having good things happen. Maybe it is possible that somebody could think you're amazing. And the answer is always going to be yes. Because I have no doubt that there is somebody, maybe somebody from your past, and certainly there will be in your future, who thinks that you are amazing, who is so happy to know you, whether it's for a very brief time or the rest of your lives. But we can't experience that as reality if we tend to get caught up in that self-protective place and not allow the reality to be present. Again, whether it's a compliment, whether it's something that you're talented at, something about who you are, the types of things, the characteristics and the traits and the strengths and the quirks and all of it that make up who you are. There is so much within you that you deserve to be able to feel good about. And if you're watching this, you're likely a survivor of trauma. And the fact that you have survived that trauma and that you're willing to do the work of healing, because that's not easy. It takes energy. All of that says so much about who you are. Experiencing the trauma, the fact that it happened, says nothing about who you are. Because it was never about you. Surviving it is everything about who you are. Your strength, your courage, your perseverance, your resilience, and so much more. So let yourself take in that compliment. Let yourself feel good about the little things and the big things. Let yourself recognize that the little things matter, sometimes matter even more than the big things, to you, to others. Let yourself take it in. Be with it. Like, notice when I said that you are amazing, what came up for you? I can imagine several things that might have come up. And if there is any sort of like pushback, resistance against that, is it possible that I could truly believe that you are? The answer is a resounding yes. I know it might be hard for you to believe that. It doesn't make it less true. So is it possible that I could believe that? Yeah. Is it possible that there are some things that you can identify that others might recognize that are pretty amazing about you? Absolutely. And I can't wait for you to be able to feel the reality of that possibility. I'd love for you to share what came up for you in the comments. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. Give it a thumbs up so other people can more easily find it. If there's anybody in your life that you think might need to hear this, please consider sharing with them. I'll look forward to seeing you soon.